Look, I think the next two episodes are very unique. I go to the US probably once a year, and this time I had the podcast. I thought, why not have a couple of episodes at least to do? I rang around, I spoke to lots of people. I managed to secure two very big interviews, probably some of the biggest guests I've ever had. The first one is the founder of SOMOS, the premium Mexican eat-at-home brand, a guy called Miguel, who is the co-founder. Miguel is probably one of the most decorated, experienced individuals I've ever had on the pod, maybe number one. He is the former chief marketing officer of Cholula hot sauce, a former chief marketing officer of Kind Bars, which recently sold for around $1 billion. Also the former chief marketing officer of Kettle Chips, which are an incredibly well-known brand. He has unbelievable experience and his contacts are through the roof. I was interested to know how his contacts and experience helped him within the first 100 days. Miguel was just an unbelievably nice guy, narrates his story incredibly. I thought it was a very honest conversation. Doing it in person is just totally different experience. So I'm so fucking excited for you to hear this. Without further ado, are you sitting comfortably? If so, we shall begin. Let's get on with it. It's so hot today.
All right.
Ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Rodrigo and I will be kicked out of 4 out of every 5 meetings that we have. Unlimited access for those 100 days to one of the greatest branding minds in the world. You know, sometimes you have to take the first step, even if it's not the right first step, and just being open that the brand is owned by the consumer, and at some point you're just gonna have to pivot in that direction.
I must admit, it's slightly odd being in this position because I think for the last 6 months or so, it's all been virtual. So I'm slightly out of practice with how to speak to humans again. So this is I'm just very excited for this. So Miguel, thank you just for joining me.
No, thank you, Will. I think the same. You just asked me if I've ever done a podcast before, and I have never done a podcast live. So this is a new thing for me, I guess.
It is. Usually you're like staring into the camera or you're looking at your computer screen. So again, we're going to have to, I'm just looking at you now, and we're going to have to sort of work out how we interact. But I think and for the benefit of the audience, we were speaking before for about 10 or 15 minutes running through the first 100 days. And there was just so much background beforehand that I hadn't even been aware about. I know you've been chief marketing officer for some brands, but I think, and I always toy with this, but I think the best place to start is, do you mind just taking us through maybe your early upbringing, but then just your unbelievably impressive career in the food and drink world?
No, thank you. I was born in Mexico. I came to the US to do my master's, a postgraduate degree. I met my wife, who's American. She's from the Midwest, and then decided to stay here. I come from a family with a lot of entrepreneurs, so it's not surprising that I started late in life to follow that path. But ever since I was a kid, I've always been interested in food, sourcing food, selling food, cooking food, especially eating food. You know, my family, just food was a very important part of my upbringing. And I've always been very interested in retail. One of the things as a kid, you know, my mom would take us grocery shopping and she would let us buy one item for each of us. And I would spend hours, you know, entertained just trying to choose that one aisle, and pricing and packaging and all of those things, even as a kid, were very interesting to me. So I kind of feel, you know, all of those things combined got me where I am. Then later in life, you know, I had the opportunity after my master's to work in what I call big food, so big food companies, There are 5 or 6 big companies in the world that are multi-billion food conglomerates. And I had a chance to work in 2 of them, which was fantastic. I work at PepsiCo in their snacks division in Frito-Lay, North America. And then I got a chance to work at Danone, Danone Yogurt in their US headquarters here close to New York. And those were great schools. I tell my kids or people that are graduating, school, that it's good to work for those big environments because they teach you how to work, and also you get to build great connections for the rest of your life. I think the second chapter in my professional career was working with turnarounds or private equity environments where you had to grow businesses very, very fast. One of them was Kettle Chips, which we talked about. The other one was Kind Bars, which is probably the most beautiful brand I've ever worked on. And then the last one was Cholula hot sauce, which was also very successful. So I had the opportunity to have those 3 exits. And now, I decided, in this new chapter to start a business from zero, which is the most challenging thing I've ever done. And I've thought after many years in the food business, over 20, getting close to 25 years of doing this, that I had everything figured out, and I realized that nothing could be farther from the truth.
Even going back to where you started, so you were saying as a kid you were going through the supermarket, you were almost obsessed with the products, obsessed with the pricing. Is there any particular reason why you think you were obsessed, or do you think it was just, some kids are interested in rugby, it's just a natural inclination that isn't explainable, it's just you're just naturally interested?
Yeah, I think, my mom is a psychologist, so I think consumer behavior was always very interesting to me. My dad, was a Eucharistic minister in the Catholic Church, and I would argue that you get to see a lot of human behavior in that environment. And I always thought the ultimate judge was the person in their shopping cart going through the aisle, standing, in front a wall of different ketchup sauces and deciding in 1 second which one to put in their cart. And I always thought that was really so savage, like just an incredible environment where a lot of decisions get together and you either win or you lose. And I just found that, very interesting.
So then fast forward, and you mentioned you worked at PepsiCo, Danone, Kettle Chips.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a period in between that where obviously you're that kid in that supermarket, you're massively, what's the word, you're just enthusiastic, and you've already said it's that decision making that is so brutal as well, that grabbed your attention. But there's a period in between where you must have studied. Did you study in that space? Or were you studying in like a totally different discipline and then found yourself in the food and drink world again?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of over 30 cousins, and all my grandfathers and uncles, they were all engineers. So I felt, I think I was very influenced by them to study engineering and work in operations. And once I graduated from engineering school and I work on the production lines, being a shift supervisor, it was not the job that I thought it was going to be, or I was not, it wasn't something that I loved. And I decided to pivot and go and get my MBA. Originally, I wanted to study a master's in finance to become a banker. I think I was very good with numbers, and I knew it would be a very profitable career, if I went in that direction. But my first class in business school was marketing, and I just completely fell in love with that class. I think it was a little bit of the intersection. Marketing at the time, this is the year 2000, was starting to become more analytical. So it went from like the Mad Men series of being like all creative to kind of like the performance marketing that we see today that is all 100% analytical. So, there was a part of it that was this consumer behavior that I've always been interested in. But then there was also the part that we were starting to quantify marketing results. And in that class, I just made a decision that I wanted to change my major, study marketing, do an internship in marketing in the middle of my MBA, which I did at General Mills. I got to work on Honey Nut Cheerios. And then I realized that, working in fast moving consumer products and working in marketing, in food marketing, was really all the things that I had like love and my heart was on, and it was just putting them all together. I remember coming back from work, and I wasn't married at the time, but calling my parents back in Mexico. I was in Minneapolis and telling my dad, I can't believe they pay me to do this job. I was just so over the moon for it.
I think that's incredible for a couple of reasons. I honestly think it's so rare that someone is just obsessed with their job. I don't want to put off the banking profession. I'm in it as well. A lot of people around here are, but I wouldn't say it's rare that many of them would say they love their job. So to be that happy, and as you've just said, you can't believe they're paying you to do it. I just think I think it's an amazing thing, and you've explained to a degree your steps after you had your first job.
Mm-hmm.
You worked in the private equity space, buying and then ultimately selling companies. You talked about Danone, Kettle Chips. Do you think that the reason that you objectively have done so well in that area, so that job you were in private equity of buying and selling those companies, was just your obsession with marketing?
Yes.
And food. I mean, it's that intersection.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky because I've been able to find jobs that I like with brands that I like as well. And I've also, sometimes it's very important to think about the roads that you didn't take, some opportunities that have come through the time where I've been tempted maybe, to go off. And I remember I had an opportunity to go and work for a laundry detergent brand.
Right.
That, was a better paying job and was a really fast growing company. And I came home and talked to my wife, and she was like, you hate doing laundry. Like, what are you gonna do? It's one of your least favorite things to do. And just, like sticking to trying to do something that would really move me to work every day, I think has been part of the success. And I also think that luck has had a really big part of it. I typically when you work on these deals, that you have, a great brand and you have a great financial sponsor on the brand as well, and you're working together to grow that brand quickly, and then, in the case of my 3 experiences, then exit that, for a really great return for the founder and for the shareholders. I think it's against your odds that you'll be able to do that 3 times in a row. And I think, it would be impossible for me. I'm not a good stock picker or a good, company picker. I just feel that I've been very lucky. I've always tried to do things or products or brands that I feel great about giving my family, and that has proven successful so far.
And going into private equity, so how did that actually come about on a practical level? Did you apply? Yeah. Did they reach out to you? And then the second question, and you've mentioned there were 3 very successful examples of you within private equity of buying and selling these companies, and you were at the heart of decision making. Was there a core strategy that you followed that, okay, here's the list of things we need to do to go from company A and then all the way up to sale? Was there a set playlist that you had, or was it quite different each time?
Yeah, I mean, those are 2 very different questions. I think, the move to private equity is probably the best pivot I've made in my career, and it totally happened by chance. And I joined this company, Diamond Foods, which is now part of Campbell Snacks, who was the holding company of Kettle potato chips. And at the time, they were buying Pringles from Procter and Gamble. So they were looking for someone that had potato chips experience, which I had, working at Lay's, at Frito-Lay. So Lay's, for your listeners overseas, is the Walkers of the U.S. And I joined that company, and that company ended up being bought by private equity, which could have gone either way, could have been a good thing for me or a bad thing for me. But when I mentioned luck had a big part of it, the partner in the private equity that was the operating partner on that deal ended up being someone that I went to graduate school with. So immediately, we had trust. We were able to put a lot of points on the board early together. And then once I feel, the reason your question is so interesting is there are a lot of people in consumer products trying to make a jump to private equity. And I feel, once you have one successful deal, it's a lot easier to get a chance at a second one and a third one. And the toughest thing to do is make that first pivot and be successful in that first pivot. And then your second question, which is how do you choose them? I think it has been a little bit of art and science. The trigger for me that I think is, would I put my money into this deal? So if I take myself completely apart, would I take half of my liquid net worth and put it and invest it into this company? Because the number one constraint that we have is time. At some point we're gonna run out of time. So if you're not willing to put your own money into a deal, you shouldn't be able to put your time into the deal. Your career and your time and the time that you're gonna, I say every morning I leave home and I say goodbye and give my wife a kiss and my kids a kiss, and then I go home. I'm not gonna leave them to go and be terrible at my job. I'm gonna leave them to go and gain share, create value, and have a lot of fun. So for me, that is kind of like the right side of the brain piece. And then the left side of the brain, I'm very lucky because I am married to someone that I believe is really the target consumer. My wife is really good with food, cooking food, sourcing food. She's been so right about identifying trends. And I also feel like she's from the Midwest. So if something works for her, I kind of feel it can work for all the country. So she's been a big part of these decisions. And, she bought me my first Kind Bar. She bought me my first bag of Kettle Chips. She's always been a huge fan of Cholula. And I feel that has been more like the art piece.
I like the way you explain that. I'm trying to think if I'm the, I suppose we're the viewer now, but if I'm listening, the way I always try and do this is think, right, I'm listening to the podcast or the thing, but I also have the benefit of changing the question. When you listen to something and you think, why didn't they ask that? Or why didn't you do that? and so I always play that role now. I'm like, I can ask it now. And so is there more of a decision-making, strict framework of, for those three brands that you just mentioned, so you mentioned Cholula as well, the Kettle Chips, Kind Bars, they're all incredibly successful brands. And you are obviously responsible for their growth. If I was in the board meeting with you for those three companies where you're explaining the strategy of how we turn these brands around or how we certainly enhance growth, what would I have heard?
Yeah, someone explained once to me that working, a private equity deal, whether it's a turnaround or like an accelerator or an exit, a very simple definition is you need to do in 3 years what people would do in 7. Okay.
Okay.
So if you take that into your mindset, I think what I was looking for were, beautiful brands. You mentioned all of these are beautiful brands. And I think Somos is a beautiful brand as well. But that there were something in their model that was broken, that wasn't that could be fixed, and that could be fixed by me and my team. Because if you're only going to do something between 3 to 5 years, you want to make sure that in the first 6 months you create value and you put points on the board. And in the case of Kettle was a beautiful brand, but through the different owners that the brand had had before, in order to maximize margin, they had sacrificed a lot of quality and taste. And I felt that I could fix that I could take the brand to the way that it was intended, and that would generate a lot of repeat rate, and that the repeat rate would generate a lot of margin expansion, and that the margin expansion would create a cash flow to build the brand via marketing. With Kind, what had happened, Kind, beautiful brand, great business, but when I came in, it had had a couple of quarters of negative growth. So they had had, a couple of quarters of flat to declining. And what had happened with that brand was they had expanded distribution a lot more than they had expanded growth in households and trial. The way that the trial for Kind was built was with sampling, and at some point you run out of sampling. Sampling is not scalable, depending on the brand, between 10 to 20% of households. So it was just to pivot at the time from sampling to, either TV or social media that were more scalable marketing mixes. And then with Cholula, the brand, great brand, I think, in terms of like business and taste, probably one of the greatest brands out there. They never invested in the quality, and also never invested in the food service marketing side of the business. And I felt I could take a lot of the dollars that exist in the business and move them towards having a better tasting product, and also promote them, with the marketing and sales team on food service, and that could create a ton of growth, and it did. So really, it's those pieces. I don't think it's only about having a great tasting product and a beautiful brand. There are a lot of great tasting products and beautiful brands out there that will never pass $100 million in sales, or even $10 million in sales. But it is that as these brands will outlive us. I'll be gone, and Kind, will still be here. But I was part of the Kind story for one chapter, and in that one chapter, what could I do to make it better? I think that was really the crux of the question.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's just that commonality, because you hear about those big success stories, those turnaround stories, and I always think, how do you do it? Because it's easy to see the bottom line of this amount of million per year, but I like the way you phrased it around. There is a clear issue where I can pull a lever. I have the expertise. Me and my team can come in. It may not be the same issue each time, company versus company, but I've identified something that I feel I can add value to, and when I solve that issue, that will then unlock this massive growth in this company, because it's got massive potential, and I can really make an impact. And that seems to be definitely the core to your decision-making framework of, do I take this challenge on? Are there any levers that I can pull?
Yeah, no, I think you said it so much better than I did.
I am merely standing. I am merely trying to sum up the wise words that we spoke. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? So you've had these big jobs that many people would say that is probably the pinnacle of their career, and they're not going to do anything more. That's it, because chief marketing officer of Danone or Kettle Chips or Cholula. You've had these big big jobs, but that wasn't enough, was it? And you wanted to start something of your own. And there may be, I don't know if there's anything that I've missed in between, but again, we've talked about problems, but there must have been, I suspect, some issue that you encountered that was the pretext to SOMOS.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of SOMOS started at Kind. You know, we're a 3-year-old business. About 6 or 7 years ago, we were working at Kind, and it was a late night, and we were thinking about other business opportunities that existed in food. And you know, a group of us, you know, we're still working together today. Daniel, my co-founder at Kind, Ellie Lanning, who's the managing director of Camino Partners, and I, you know, we came up with this insight, and the insight, which was very practical for me and Daniel. We're both, you know, Mexicans that were born in Mexico, that became U.S. citizen, and that married Americans, and that live in the U.S. We saw how much Mexican food changed at the restaurants. You know, Chi-Chi's became Chipotles. There were a lot of like birria trucks in the city. There were more Michelin star restaurants in the Mexican restaurants in the U.S. than there were in Mexico. You and I were talking about it, this whole premiumization of Mexican everything. You know, premium Mexican tequila. You know, Modelo is now bigger than Bud Light. And Mexican food and Mexican restaurants became huge. But then when we tried to do that food that was very fashionable at restaurants, birria, moles, even like fancier quesadillas, it was impossible to do it at home. Just the restaurant, in terms of Mexican and Mexican premium food, moved a lot quicker than the shelf did. In the shelf, there were still these, you know, hard yellow, you know, crunchy tacos, and you know, the cheddar Mexican mix, and
El Paso, and all
canned beans, you know, all of these, you know, different products on the shelf, and we wanted to close that gap. You know, Mexican food, when we did a little bit of research, 82% of Mexican food is bought at a restaurant, and 18% of Mexican food is cooked at home, where the second largest ethnic food, which is Italian food, is a lot closer to 50-50. So we measured that gap and that opportunity to close the first share at $30 billion, and we felt, okay, first of all, we don't think there is a bigger opportunity at the retail than to capture their fair shares. And then we also thought, honestly, with a lot of humility, that there weren't a lot of people that could do that, because, you know, Daniel and I had worked in food our entire careers. We were both Mexicans, and especially Daniel had just come from being the founder of Kind, you know, just one of the most successful FMCG, you know, foods in the US. And we said, if someone is gonna do it, you know, it could be us.
If I was there with you on the day that you decided to found SOMOS, appreciate it might not have been called that at that point, but if I'd followed you around that day and been part of those conversations, yeah, what would I have encountered?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was in the middle of COVID, so Daniel and I were not in person, so we had a conference call. I was towards the end of my journey with Cholula, so we were already in the process of handing that over to McCormick. And you know, he asked me, what are you gonna do next? And I think I was, you know, very confused. You know, I was still figuring out how to, you know, feel about no longer being part of the Cholula brand, which was something that I loved. And then when he said, hey, remember that idea that we had? I think this is as good as a moment to do it. And I came home, again in COVID. There were only a few people that I could interact with, and I talked to my wife, and she so far has been a big influence on what decision I take and when I don't take. And we talked about it, and I called Daniel back, and I think I was so excited. And I was excited of the idea that would become SOMOS. It didn't have a name back there. It was just our, Mexican food business plan. But I think I was equally excited about the idea as an immigrant to own my own business. And I think that is the pinnacle of the American dream. Like, I feel I live the American dream in many ways. I came to this country, I got a great education, I met my wife, I had a family, I own my own home. But for me, the pinnacle of this, capitalist society is create something that is good, for, I want to say, the category, is good for the world, it creates jobs for other people. And what better thing than to move Mexican food up, and Mexican values and Mexican culture as part of that, and to show people that Mexican food doesn't have to be cheap, that it can do clean ingredients, and that it could be, a great source of nutritionals, and really change those perceptions.
Sounds like on many dimensions that it makes sense, especially as you're giving others the chance to maybe get exposure to that sector, and they can potentially live their American dream at some point. And so that feels to me like it was a big part of the decision. Was it an obvious choice that you wanted to go ahead with SOMOS? Was there any debate about whether this was a good idea or not? Because from the conversation that we've just had, I can see it from your face, it's just so bloody positive. But was there any behind closed doors conversations around, okay, you've just come off the back of a big, very successful sale with Cholula. What should we be doing now? Okay, there's this amazing idea for premium Mexican food that people can cook at home. There's obviously a huge disparity between what people are eating out and eating at home in terms of Mexican food. So was it just super obvious, or was there other ideas, or there was just anguish as to whether you should go ahead with it or not?
So there was obviously anguish, because even though I was very naive and very excited, I knew the odds of starting a business from zero, there is a lot of risk involved. But I also, something that was very important for me making that decision is who was going to be my partner in that journey. And I think, and it was something that my wife Jeanette brought up after knowing Daniel for 10 to 15 years, seeing what he did with Kind, taking this business from zero to billions of dollars in sales, and doing something more beautiful. But most importantly, seeing how well he took care of everybody around him. And I don't mean just financially, although that was a big part of it too, but anytime anyone had any family issues, he knew what everybody in that building was going through at all times, and he knew everybody by name, sit with everybody, at least for an hour or two every year, and that, just knowing that I was doing it with him made the decision very easy.
So understood. And so it was an obvious partner to have, just given the nature of conversations, and you'd made those relationships over a number of years at Kind.
And also, just having someone that I admire that was so successful at building a business, and then he's like, okay, here is what I'm gonna do after Kind. I'm gonna start this business with you. And I say, okay, I don't know all the answers on how this is gonna come, but I think between the two of us and then, the team that we'll build, we're gonna figure this out.
If I was to speak to Daniel about why he wanted to be a business partner with you, I mean, you've been very kind about some of the like huge advantages of working with him. He sounds like an incredible guy, but what would he say about you?
I think Daniel and I have a lot of fun together. You know, I don't mean to minimize what I bring to the table, but we've had a lot of challenges together at Kind and at Somos. Not everything has been good news, but we've always had a lot of fun. And I think as both of us, you know, he's a little bit older than me, but we're about the same age, as we were looking to what was the next chapter, you know, you kind of realize that, you know, if you're gonna do something, you might as well enjoy it.
And then enjoying it means that you're enthusiastic, you want to do it as well as you can, you're fixated on delivering the best outcome you can possibly give, whether that be the product itself, employing others. We talked about the American dream earlier. Your need for Mexican food to raise up the levels like other cuisines have. I think there's multiple reasons why it does make sense. I'm very interested in the first 100 days. It's the premise of the podcast. And we spoke a little bit about, I'm just going to redo that one sec. I just want to see if this still, I heard something in my, that's fine, it's fine. So I'm very, very paranoid that this is, let's go. Yeah, this, so the premise is the first 100 days, because I wonder for so many people who are, and this is maybe where the connection stops slightly with you, is that a lot of people aren't in jobs they love, and I think it's incredible that you've had the career you've had up until SOMOS. And there's obvious reasons why that's been the case, but there's a lot of people that don't enjoy their job and they're wanting something more, but they're scared about making that first step. And so I think if we can break the boundaries of how to create something, that gives people at least a blueprint of how to take that first step themselves. So I'm just so interested in that beginning point, because we could talk about all the big successes and the high level stuff, but I don't think that necessarily gives people a clear direction. So those first 100 days, and again, for the benefit of the audience, we did speak a bit about this, we're fleshing it out beforehand, weren't we? But are there any core components you'd say in those first 100 days that stand out now that they might not have gone to plan, or that you might look back at them and say, okay, they didn't even work out at all? But are there any core components in those first 100 days that explain why you are where you are with SOMOS today?
Yeah, so we decided to do this, and the first thing we needed to do was come up with a name because it was that Mexican food idea we had 5 years ago. I don't think would have looked great on the shelf, and we brought our wives, Michelle and Jeanette, because we wanted a name that was not only interesting for Mexicans, but if this company was going to be successful, it was going to be adopted also by mainstream consumers. And we ideated 200 different words, and SOMOS, the name SOMOS actually was Michelle's, Daniel's wife, idea, and it was a mix of things. Daniel loved it because of what it means. It means we are, and if we are gonna have a food that is made in Mexico, grown in Mexico, cooked in Mexico, but embraced by the US mainstream consumer, it has to create a sense of community. And that name, we are, we felt was a very powerful word. I love that because it is a word that is written the same word forward that it is backwards. So it's a very symmetrical word, and I thought it would look great on packaging. So it would be a very nice word to design type around and design packaging around. And then it was available on social channels. It was available on the website. There were no trademark issues with the word, so it cleared, a lot of our options. So I felt like that was step one. We needed an identity, a word that will capture the mission of what we were doing. Once we have the word, we needed to create the product, and very quickly, especially during COVID, we realized that was something that Daniel and I did not have. We are both more on the marketing, general management side of things. So we decided to bring in a third co-founder and a third founder. And there was only, there was a list that only had one name on it. And that was Rodrigo Zuluaga, who, it's a wonderful human being, but he was the head of product at Kind. He's the one that came up with the Kind bars. He's also Mexican, comes from a family of chefs. He's a food scientist. And also at the time, he was living in Mexico. He was, because of some, family situation, he was in Guadalajara at the time. So Daniel and I conference called Rodrigo and convinced him to come in, and that checked two boxes for us. They checked the box, we had the name, and now we had started building the teams, what we had and what we don't have, and then we brought someone that could create the product. So Rodrigo started sending us, the rices, the beans, the cooking sauces that I brought for you today, which ended up being our portfolio.
Sorry to jump in. So how do you actually source the products? Appreciate that he was helping with that, but
yeah.
Where is he getting the product from? Were you part of the decision? How does that work?
Yeah. So Rodrigo is in Guadalajara and he's sending products for Daniel and I to try, and immediately, we loved these boxes that he was putting together. They would, he would send them to us via DHL, from Mexico, and, they would arrive in our houses. And this is COVID, so maybe we were able to invite like a couple of neighbors, and we would cook them from them. And we were trying to determine like product market fit in a weird way. And people were so shocked that we could create Mexican food in less than 10 minutes out of these pouches and put it together, and that it would taste better than it tasted, if you order something from Uber Eats. So that was our first shock, me here just outside of New York and Daniel in Texas, was that there's a big international community here, and it didn't matter if I would bring people that were Americans or Chileans or French, that lived on my street. Typically Mexican recipes take an hour to make, require 12 different ingredients, and leave your kitchen a mess. And here we were, from 3 pouches, being able to create a burrito bowl in less than 10 minutes, or tacos in less than 10 minutes. So that was, a big form of surprise. So we said, okay, this is the business. Like, this is what we want to do. What we want to do is, make sure people know that they don't have to sacrifice nutrition for convenience or taste. This would be the pyramid, the 3 things that become the SOMOS brand promise.
And what was it about the product that made it so good? And how I'm just thinking, if you're someone that is starting a similar brand where, okay, I appreciate it's not Mexican, but where you're trying to create maybe the experience you have from a takeaway or in a restaurant in a very short space of time from a certain packet, how do you find that product and make it as good?
Yeah, I think, this has happened in a lot of categories, but it hadn't happened in this category. I think you can go back and remember the first time you had a high quality Indian food. You and I were just talking about it. I remember the first time I had like premium Indian food and what a difference it was. I remember the first time I had a frozen pizza that was actually made with good quality ingredients, that they were no longer competing who was the cheapest pizza, but what was the better tasting pizza. And I remember many years later, meeting with one of our buyers who's now, the number one customer for Somos, and she telling me, what you are doing is very hard to do because you are going to the ethnic aisle where typically we've had product, that are very cheap, that are targeted, for immigrants, and you're bringing clean labels, non-GMO sourcing, and doing a high quality with a little bit more premium price in a category that has always competed by price. So in a way, that was the piece that we felt created the biggest difference. I love rice, and I've been buying rice in pouches for many years, and I don't like doing rice from scratch. So I've been a huge buyer in that category, and what I found out is if we could bring high quality ingredients and clean label, you would end up paying 30, 40 cents more, but the difference in taste was like 3x. And that's what made me fall in love with the opportunity.
I suppose it's actually, from the perspective that you're coming from of a love for the food, it's probably impossible not to do that in a way because you were never willing to settle for anything less just because it's cheaper. I think for the perspective you were taking is that this has to be a good quality. That's where we're working from, and then we work backwards with price. Is that how you approached it, or is it too simplistic?
I don't think I approached it at the time, but is that like famous Steve Jobs quote that you cannot connect the dots moving forward, right?
Okay.
You can only connect them moving backwards, but the way that you put it, it totally makes sense because I go back to my origin story, and that's what Kettle did. Think about, in the UK, you'd had like Walkers before, and then this chef, came up with Kettle Chips, and it was a little bit more expensive, but it was so much better than the other products that were in the market until, it became a big brand in the UK and in the US. And I would argue that Kind brands did it even more successfully. If you think before Kind bars, all the bars were baked and all the ingredients were, grinded and put together on something that didn't look like food. And Kind was the first brand that it will show you all the ingredients and only had ingredients you could see and pronounce. And it was a little bit more expensive than the other brands, but you could see the ingredients, you could taste the ingredients. I felt a lot of the magic in Kind was the texture. And I feel, Cholula was the same, and Somos is doing the same thing, that we are trying to take one category and make, offer a completely different solution that when you put it in value of, quality and price, maybe 10% higher price, but 100% higher quality, it totally makes sense for the consumer. And again, the challenge was going to be marketing it. We knew if consumer gave us a chance, and we see it today in the numbers, and people cook with Somos for the first time. If they cook with one Somos ingredient, and then cook with two Somos ingredients, and then when they cook with three Somos ingredients, the repeat rate just goes off the chart.
So just distilling this down, so you have the name, we talked about the product per se, I'll come back to that in a bit. Then you mentioned brand, and in the context of the first 100 days, if I was there on say day 99 or day 50, was there much debate around how it should be marketed, what the branding should look like, what is the feeling that I get by looking at this Mexican food? Was there much debate about that? Because you come from a background, so did Daniel, of marketing for big brands. How did that play out?
Yeah, I think that is so interesting because I've never thought about it that way. So let me tell you the way that it happened, and then we can talk about why it happened that way. But the first 100 days, I would say most of our heart and attention went to branding. So we had the name Somos. We started building the team, with the third co-founder, Rodrigo.
Mm.
Then we started sourcing the products. We came up with the brand promise, but I probably had access, unlimited access for those 100 days to one of the greatest branding minds in the world, which was Daniel. When you look at, I've worked for many brands, but I would say if you look at the Kind brand, just on branding, is one of the most beautiful brands you will ever see. And I say how awesome it would be to dedicate 60, 75 days, the two of us working every day on SOMOS. And in reality, that's something that I could not do today because, Daniel now, has started Camino Partners and they own several different businesses, and he also has his family foundation. But at that point in time, we had 100% of his attention. And the fact that we use it for branding, which I would say he's on the 1% of 1% of people talented to do that, that was the magic of Somos. I think the other stuff we figured it after, how to market the product, how to bring it to consumer. We made a lot of mistakes and we pivoted until we got it right, but we got the branding right from the beginning. Our branding still today, we go to customer presentations and they tell us, I bought your product because of the branding. I saw it at, Whole Foods, I saw it at Target, I saw it at Costco, and I wanted to bring it into my store because it caught my eye on the shelf.
So if we were going to have a made-up piece of paper here, and on there is, this is the equation to get the perfect branding, and this is in the context of SOMOS. And so you've got A plus B plus C plus D, and then equals, we've got it right. What is A, what is B, what is C, what is D?
I mean, if I knew the formula to that, I wouldn't be working on a Mexican company. I think I would be dedicating my time. I really think my formula was bringing talented people, Daniel and this group of designers from Mexico, Common Matter. Daniel and I are branding people. You need excellent designers in. And I'll tell you the journey. We connected with them in Mexico with Lily Rodriguez, who's the head of Common Matter. And Daniel and I had a conference call with her and told her what we wanted the brand to be. And she came back to us and she said, I really feel like there is a form of Mexican art that really captures what you guys are talking about, and it's alebrijes. If you've seen the movie Coco, the Pixar movie, those like animals that are different animals putting together, but they are all different colors and different texts. And he said in the alebrijes form of art, which, I hope I'm getting this right, is from the turn of the century, western part of Mexico. You bring different colors and different textures by hand that by themselves would look great, but where you bring them together, it creates something even more beautiful. And her thought was, if we explore this creative direction, we are doing what you're saying. Because on the mission of the company, we're trying to bring different cultures together to create one community. But on the product line, we're bringing 2-3 different SOMOS products together to create a magical dish. And I think, taking that direction that is very colorful, spending a lot of time on the details. Every SOMOS product is different and every one is made by hand. And I think with that you see like the care that we brought to the product. And then what I think is, here, in the US market, the number one day of cooking Mexican food is on Tuesday, it's Taco Tuesday. So it would be, we're recording on a Tuesday, it would be tonight. And it is, incredible that, all of those, the last place that you go in before you go to Taco Tuesday is the Mexican aisle. and it should be something colorful, celebrated, and we want to bring all those colors together on the shelf. We felt that it was missing.
Yeah, it's that it's that desire to like really improve the offering. Again, it's that how best can we create this product? We can make it so that it tastes amazing, but as you've just said, the branding is so important because it's people's first impression. How does it make them feel?
Yeah.
And I certainly agree, like looking at the products, it must have been a specific choice to make it very bright, colourful, happy. It gives you a good feeling. It definitely sticks in your mind. Like you're not going to forget that brand for a while. I wonder, were you heavily involved in the process of branding at the beginning, or were you more taking direction from who you were speaking with?
No, I think
about how
the beauty is, these branding processes, and Daniel and I had the opportunity of, doing a brand redesigning kind, where, the two of us and our creative director, Mika, who's now the creative director at SOMOS, we redid in 1 year 400 kind SKUs. So it was also not the first time that we had done branding together, and I felt like that was important. So in our first 100 days, I had a lot of Daniel's attention. I had 100% of my attention. There was nothing else going on, professionally in our lives at the time, and we could just jump and dive in and do 100% of this project with the designers. And I think it was like very special. It was, when you're in your first 100 days, these things make a huge difference, because where you put your heart and where you put your attention might end up making or breaking the company. And I think because we chose this path, and I think we nailed it, it ended up a big unlock for us.
Did you always agree, you and Daniel, on what the branding should be? What are the sorts of conversations you were having at the time?
No, we actually, I think part of the reason we have so much fun is because we do not agree on things, and but we respect each other so much. And that was part of the culture at Kind that we wanted to bring to SOMOS, which is, conflict, if it is well managed, can unlock a lot of creativity, especially with people that have known each other for over 10 years. So there is a lot of trust. So I felt, him and I having all these different points of view, and then, Lily and her team being able, to put that into the design was what made it so beautiful.
Yeah, I agree, actually. Having constructive debates, you iron out, don't you? That's the whole point of a debate. As long as you both respect each other and you know that you'll come to some conclusion.
Yes.
I think it's, and if you both agreed on everything, then again, there's probably less value in that.
I think that's part of the reason we have so much fun, because we actually are surprised when we agree on things, and that makes it great.
I just think it's so interesting just being privy to those early conversations about how things are created, because again, everyone's view would be of your Instagram or maybe your website or the products themselves, the taste. But the most interesting part, in my view, I mean, the taste is obviously incredibly important, but the process behind how you even get to that isn't just a straight path of we did this and that and that and that and that. There were conversations, disagreements. We didn't 100% know what we were doing. We needed help from X, Y, and Z. I think that in itself is an art. It's just very interesting how you can get to that end product from all of that. Chaos is the wrong word, but just all of those different components.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even today, we just had our Q2 board meeting last week, and we have, product lines, and we're designing the investment levels on product lines, and you have, your clear winner, and then you have, clearly the places that are struggling, but we immediately jump to the middle, which is the things that, require a little bit more of conflict resolution, of different points of view and different people, giving their opinions, and then reaching a conclusion at the end, which is not the conclusion where I thought, the board meeting was going to start, but end, but it's definitely, a place that I think it's better than what we thought, and it's better because of those different opinions coming together.
And anything else in the first 100 days that sticks out? We talked about creating a anti-G or non-GMO supply chain.
Yeah, I think that ended up being a huge unlock. I remember Rodrigo and I going to Mexico and trying to source these products from different growers and different suppliers, and people just thought we were crazy. They said, hey, to do this like gluten-free, or to do this non-GMO, to do this, clean ingredients or clean label, it is just going to be so much more expensive. Like, why don't you just do something cheap? We already have, capabilities to do things cheap, and we got kicked out of a lot of rooms, and it wasn't until we, found our current partner that believed in the product and the premiumization. I think they were really skeptical as well, but they say, hey, let's give it a try. They believe more in the mission than actually what we were doing. Now that we, are bigger, we get a chance to talk to more companies. But at the beginning, when this was just a PowerPoint slide, I think our batting percentage was like 100 or 200, but Rodrigo and I would be kicked out of 4 out of every 5 meetings that we had.
And what, because of the price point?
I think also because of the complexity.
Okay.
Doing things well and to the mission that we wanted to do, it's a lot harder than doing them the old way.
But how did you solve that issue of supply chain practically? How long did it take?
It took good 9 to 12 months to get that right. So it was definitely a post 100 days, kind of like conversation.
And to actually get to that point, a lot of work, a lot of conversations. How did you actually execute that?
Yeah, I mean, right now we do have a quality and sourcing team in Mexico that works with the family farms that we source ingredients and materials from. But I'll give you an example to illustrate the point. So rice is gluten-free, but the supply chain to transport rice is not gluten-free. You can use trailers and trucks and packaging that have carried ingredients with gluten. So to clean that up and convince someone to manage it that way, so we can get it sourced, to our plants, requires work, and requires working with your suppliers, and requires them, believing that this is going to be, incremental business, and also moving up, something that moves Mexico. Right now is great because we have a big community of suppliers in Mexico that love what we're doing with SOMOS, and now they see it, and they see, like the movie Coco, something that is telling a beautiful part of the Mexican story, and not just something, another cheap product on the shelf.
Is there anything you look back on the first 100 days that went terribly wrong, but in retrospect was still valuable to where you are today?
I think I look at a lot of things that were completely wrong and completely invaluable to us today. When we started the company, we created a lot of products that were too spicy because we didn't have an idea who was going to be the end consumer for SOMOS. We also had a lot of, names, nomenclatures that were too cute. There were a lot of like inside, jokes that people didn't get, and then, we had to rename, and in some cases throw away, packaging. In a way, all of those experiences have made us the brand and the product and the team that we are today. So I don't know that I would completely dismiss them, but I do, made a lot of decisions at the beginning. We launched 100% direct to consumer, and then the pandemic ended, and we went, that business went to zero immediately, and we pivoted to retail, where 96-97% of our sales are today. So, what is that Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And, I'll tell you, that explains it to a T. Sometimes you have to take the first step, even if it's not the right first step, and just being open that the brand is owned by the consumer, and at some point you're just going to have to pivot in that direction.
Do you see any patterns of behavior when you're at your previous companies? So you talked about wanting to be able to fix a big issue that you thought would unlock the growth. Do you see any patterns in the way you behave there with how you behaved in the company, and then how you're working with SOMOS? So are there certain similar approaches that you're taking that may not be obvious at the time? We talked about the Steve Jobs quote, but actually now looking at it again, there's similarities there.
I really don't. I feel, starting a business from zero, it's its own different animal. I thought I would be able to take a lot from my 25 years of experience in food, but the reality is that growing a business from $0 to $20 million, was completely, nothing could have prepared me for that. I think like the one thing in pattern of behavior that now that you ask the question, I see is there, is the being open to being wrong, or just, letting, the data tell you where to go. And, when you are wrong, just pivoting quickly to making it right for the consumer. And I think, I did that at Kettle and at Kind and at Cholula, and more than anything, we're doing that at SOMOS today.
Yeah, I'm no doubt, because I suppose there's the obvious things as well, but there may be things below the surface in terms of the way you manage those companies, the three you just mentioned, and now how you're working at SOMOS. There may be even things that you're just not even aware of. As you just said, 0 to 20 million, most companies that start food and drink brands, I don't know the statistics, I'd say very few of them get to that stage in terms of revenue. So then there's probably even things that you're doing that it's like not even conscious, maybe.
Yes, no, I agree. I mean, I feel very blessed. We found this opportunity. Is an opportunity that didn't exist on the shelf. It's a huge opportunity for our retail partners to capture share of Mexican food from restaurants. So we have this big community that wants to see us work. Our suppliers in Mexico are very proud of it because it elevates, Mexican cuisine on the shelf. And to make it even bigger is what Daniel, Rodrigo, and I have done our entire life, and it is exactly our culture. And I think a lot about that. If I weren't doing SOMOS, what else would I be doing? And I cannot come up with a better answer. I think this is, exactly where I'm meant to be. And, the days where I have, just like terrible news, and, other founders that are listening to this know that it comes in waves. You get like 5 good news in a row, and then you get like 10 bad news in a row. That is the piece that, gives me a lot of comfort, that I feel like I am doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing now.
Yeah, on that point, I think we're broadly coming to the end of the chat, and there's 2 things that stick out to me. I've started to ask this question a bit more because I think it's important, but especially your time during Kettle Chips, the other 2 brands that you mentioned, and then SOMOS, and this is a really broad question, I don't know if I'm going to get it right, but how do you see the world when you're working at those companies in SOMOS? And an example of that could be, I know this is slightly philosophical, but there could be two people in a room, and someone can see the room in a totally different way that's filled with people than others. Someone could see it as a dangerous place where things could go wrong, and someone else could see it as an opportunity to speak to loads of people. That's just very basic, but is there a way that you see the world in particular, and do you think that then feeds into it?
I think I am very biased on the world, and I am biased because of exactly what you said, because of the industry that I have worked with. I've worked with natural food products for almost the past 20 years, in the 4 brands that we have mentioned. And I get together with other founders for our trade show the second week of March every year in California. And the whole ecosystem gets together, all the founders get together, all the suppliers get together, and all the retailers get together. And I always leave feeling so hopeful about the world, that there is a consumer out there. If we go to the beginning of our conversation, me as a kid standing on the shelf trying to understand why one consumer would come in I would choose one peanut butter, and then another consumer would come in and choose another peanut butter, where all of them, were on the shelf. And I think of that consumer that is out there that is paying a little bit more because something is going to taste better, or because they believe in the mission of that company, what that company is doing, or because they know the sourcing that we are doing, and that movement and that consumer allows us to do what we love, which is, source these recipes and trying to make their life a little bit better through taste, through convenience, and through sourcing better ingredients. And I think like that connection, I always leave feeling like all of us in this like little corner of our world, we are, making, that part of the day a little bit better, and we are getting that loyalty in return. And I think that extends to the rest of my life. I also, try to, because of that, give people the benefit of the doubt, and say yes to a lot more things that I should probably be saying yes to. And it's something that has really touched my life, and I think in a very positive way.
I couldn't think of a better way to finish the episode.
All right.
I think you've told the story so well, and I think we need to do just generally more in-person episodes. They're just far better. But I just want to say thank you very much for that.
Yeah, it is my
really
pleasure. Well, good
time.
to finally meet you and to do this episode together. Thank you for your interest and your support on SOMOS.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how the journey goes. I hope we stay in touch. I have no doubt this is only the beginning. All right, excellent.
Thank you.
How do you find it?